The mirror tells me what I already know, I look damn good. Dress hugs my curves, makeup's on point. Another night out, another girls' night out. At least, that's the lie Mike buys. He gets that worried look when I leave like a kicked puppy about to be left alone. Don't stay out too late, okay? He says, voice soft. Pathetic. I almost roll my eyes, but I give him a sweet smile instead. It's part of the game, see? Gotta keep him thinking he's in control. The club's thumping, lights flashing. Feels good to be out, to let loose after a week of his boring routine. Mike's already blowing up my phone. Thinking of you. Wish I was there, blah blah blah. It's almost cute how clueless he is. Makes me feel powerful, in charge. I need that, gotta have that feeling. Across the room, some guy catches my eye. Tall, dark, could be a model. He's my ticket to a fun night, a distraction. He won't know what hit him. See, Mike's sweet, but he's boring. I need a little danger in my life, a little reminder that I'm still hot, that I'm still got it. Mike's too comfortable. He doesn't see me like these guys on the dance floor do. That hungry look in their eyes, it's intoxicating. Let's be real, the guys out here, it's just a game. I'm the one playing, they're the pieces. Tonight, this model-looking dude is gonna be my pawn. Makes me feel good, makes me feel young and alive again. Mike, well, he makes me feel responsible, heavy, and a girl's gotta shake that off sometimes. The club was loud, but my head was louder. Mike's last text echoed in my mind, please come home. I love you. What a sap. I should have felt bad, but mostly I just felt annoyed. Like, can't a girl get some space? Model guy was cute and surprisingly fun. We ended up at his place later. It was fine. Not the best I've ever had, but it did the job. Gave me that release I needed, an escape from boring, safe, predictable Mike. He was a rush, a thrill, something I hadn't felt with Mike in years. Morning rolled around, and I felt the usual mix of things. A little bit guilty, a little bit smug, and a whole lot of relief. The night had done its trick. It zapped that nagging boredom and replaced it with a surge of excitement. Now, I could go back to being the good wife for a while. Throw Mike a bone, keep him happy, and give myself enough time to plan the next escape. Walking back in, I almost expected Mike to be up, looking like a wounded puppy dog. But no, still asleep. I snuck in, changed out of those party clothes, and tossed the whole outfit in the back of the closet. Evidence gone, like it never even happened. He stirred as I climbed back into bed, mumbling my name. For a split second, I almost felt a pang of something. Guilt, maybe? But then he rolled over and went back to sleep. Part of me felt like I should wake him up, tell him the truth, that his perfect little wife was a fraud. But, the other part, the stronger part, whispered, why bother? It was almost too easy. I should have felt terrible, you know. Wife sneaking around, husband none the wiser. But honestly, it felt more like relief. Mike got to stay in his little bubble world, and I got to live my double life. Seemed like a fair trade, at least to me. And hey, if I played my cards right, nobody had to get hurt. The nights became a blur. Model guy turned into other guys. A bartender, a guy the first met at the gym, even that hot neighbor I'd always secretly admired. It was a whirlwind of lies. Late nights at the office, business trips, the trusty, girls' night out. And Mike? Well, he wasn't stupid, but he was blinded by whatever idealized version of me he had in his head. He'd get quieter, that sad look in his eyes getting deeper, but he'd still smile and say, welcome home, honey. Pathetic. It was like a game of chicken, waiting to see who'd crack first. Then, one night, I went home extra late, giddy from some new guy's attention, thinking I was untouchable. I tossed my clothes in a pile and crashed into bed next to Mike. The next morning, he was up before me, leaving for work early. Routine stuff, but when I got up, I saw it, a smudge of bright red lipstick on his collar. A jolt of rage shot through me. My first thought was, how dare he? I hadn't even been trying to hide my escapades anymore, yet he finds a woman? It was unfair, hypocritical. The fury was almost blinding. It took a few deep breaths to control myself enough to confront him. When he came home that night, I launched into it. What the hell is this? I threw the shirt at him, voice shaking with anger. I don't know, he stammered, looking genuinely confused. That fueled my rage even more. Was he playing dumb? Don't lie to me, I hissed. Accusations flew like daggers, late nights, strange perfumes, the distance between us. He denied it, tried to be calm, but I could see how the doubt began gnawing away at him. That night was one of our worst fights ever. Sleepless and fuming, it suddenly hit me. Was he turning the tables? Was this his way of getting back at me, an act of twisted revenge? Honestly, it would be smart. If he had proof, if he could expose my lies, I'd be the one looking pathetic. The one getting hurt. The thought made me shiver. I had to get control of this situation, and fast. The room felt too small, a cage closing in around me. Mike stood there, the stained shirt crumpled on the floor, his face a mask of quiet determination. It was so unlike him, this stillness, this resolve. He wasn't the man I'd manipulated for so long. This was a stranger. "I'm done, Sarah," he said, my name sounding foreign after so long of hearing pet names and endearments. "I'm filing for divorce." The words echoed in my ears, each syllable a hammer blow. My whole world, the one I had carefully constructed, crumbled. My control? It was an illusion, a house of cards collapsing under its own weight. Panic rose like bile in my throat. It choked out a pathetic squeak. "Wait. Don't do this." He watched me with a detachment that terrified me. "I should have done this a long time ago," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just hoped you'd change. But you didn't." Desperation clawed at me, replacing the initial shock. The begging started. Promises I knew I couldn't keep, pathetic pleas for forgiveness, the whole arsenal of worn-out tactics. I clung to the image of the perfect wife, trying to resuscitate something long dead. His face didn't soften, it hardened. "You think you're so clever," he said, and it was the coldness in his eyes that scared me more than any shouting. "The night's out, the lies. I wasn't an idiot, Sarah. You took me for a fool, and now..." He trailed off, shaking his head. Each word was a slap, each accusation cutting deeper than the last. He wasn't groveling, wasn't offering second chances. He was done. It dawned on me, a sickening realization. Maybe the lipstick stain was real, a clumsy act of defiance from someone he'd found the courage to be with. Or worse, maybe he hadn't found anyone at all. Maybe he was just finally seeing me, seeing through me for what I really was, selfish, manipulative, and ultimately, alone. The fight drained from me, replaced by a bone-deep weariness. I knew it was over. My perfect little game had backfired spectacularly. He walked out of the room, and for the first time, it wasn't me leaving. It felt like a part of me had been ripped out, not the fiery, exciting part, but the rotten core I'd kept hidden for so long. In the silence that followed, I couldn't even muster up the energy to cry. My head was throbbing. It wasn't just a hangover from too much cheap wine. It was the weight of everything crashing down around me. Mike had become a machine, cold, precise, and utterly devastating. Gone was the man I could manipulate so easily, replaced by a stranger holding a thick stack of papers. "This," he said, his voice flat, "is how you spent your late nights." Surveillance photos, dates, times, locations, including the apartment of that guy you met at the club a few months back. The apartment. I'd been so careful, I thought. He must have hired someone, a private investigator. Shame coursed through me, hot and bitter. Photos flashed in front of me. Me walking in with different men. Blurry figures in doorways, license plates, dates meticulously logged. I felt sick, exposed. Every flimsy lie, every careless night, it was all laid out in front of me, an ugly tapestry of betrayal. How long had he known? How long had he been compiling his evidence, playing the fool while I made one of myself? He was never weak, only patient. He played the long game, and I'd lost, spectacularly. "And this," he continued, dropping more papers on the table. "Bank statements. Transfers out of our joint account. Cash withdrawals. I assume your little escapes weren't exactly free." The numbers swam in front of my eyes. Money I'd siphoned away for clothes, gifts for the guys, fancy hotels. It was all there, proof of my greed. He wasn't yelling, wasn't crying. His voice was dangerously calm, more terrifying than anger. He walked to the door, leaving the evidence on the table like the wreckage of our life. He paused with his hand on the knob. "I won't even ask for an explanation," he said, turning to look back at me. "It wouldn't matter. I just want you out." And then he walked away. This time, I was the one left speechless. The door closed with a soft click, and the silence was suffocating. I was trapped in a prison of my own making, confronted by the reflection of an ugly, hollow stranger. Days turned into an endless, murky loop. An empty wine bottle became my best friend, its sharp sting a temporary release from the crushing guilt and humiliation. I'd lost everything. The thrill of the game, the power over Mike, the comfort of the life we'd built. My reflection was a mocking reminder of my own stupidity. One hangover-choked morning, a sharp knock on the door made me jump. Mike stood there, stone-faced, another stack of damn papers in his hand. No apologies, no hints of reconciliation. Just the final severance. "Here," he said, his voice flat. "The divorce settlement. Look it over. Sign it when you're able." He turned to leave, and something in me snapped. The self-pity evaporated, replaced by a burning rage. "Settlement?" I practically spat the word. "You call this a settlement?" My eyes scanned the pages, fury rising with each line. He was leaving me with nothing. The house, the savings, everything I thought was mine, gone. The life I'd carefully built was being systematically dismantled, clause by clause. Mike was stripping me bare. And that's when the shift happened. A twisted sort of clarity descended, a cold fury cutting through the fog of alcohol and despair. If he wanted a fight, he was about to get one. "You want to play dirty, Mike?" My voice was low, a threat barely masking the venom rising inside me. "Just wait and see." He glanced at me, a flicker of something, concern maybe, in his eyes. But I slammed the door shut before he could say a word. The papers, the evidence of his meticulously planned revenge, lay scattered at my feet. A smile curled my lips. It wasn't a nice smile, not the one I'd perfected for him. This was a promise. He took my game, my sense of control. But games have rules, and I was about to change them entirely. If he wouldn't let me have what I wanted, then neither would he. My mind went into overdrive, fueled by equal parts spite and a desperate need for survival. Revenge wouldn't change the past, but it could damn well shape the future. Mike wanted to bury me? I'd make sure he went down with me. The guys, my guys from before, they weren't the types found in Mike's fancy offices. They had different kinds of skills learned in seedy bars and back alleys, not boardrooms. I started reaching out, a spider weaving a web, reconnecting with old flames eager to return a favor or two. Meetings happened in smoky corners, hushed conversations with people who'd always held a certain fascination for me. People operating in the shadows, where loyalty was bought and reputations could be destroyed with the right information. My thirst for revenge unlocked a part of me I'd barely acknowledged, calculating, ruthless, and utterly determined. Mike's world was built on secrets, on deals made behind closed doors. I started unearthing them one by one. Business rivals, the ones he'd always kept at arm's length, became my best friends. A whispered deal, a strategic piece of intel, a friendly tip-off about a shady transaction. My little gifts aimed right at the foundation of his perfect empire. And the best part? No one could trace it back to me. I was a ghost, a vengeful spirit manipulating the game board from afar. News reports started popping up. Investigations into his company, a whiff of scandals, investors getting nervous. Each news alert brought a surge of twisted satisfaction. I was the architect of his downfall, and it felt better than any affair ever had. The power wasn't about passion this time, it was about destruction. He tried to crush me, but I was back and stronger than ever, using the very skills he'd always underestimated. Every crack in his facade was a victory. My revenge was a slow burn, a poison meticulously injected into the life he tried to take from me. Headlines splashed across newspapers like bloodstains, tax fraud, insider trading. The whispers I'd set in motion turned into a media frenzy. Mike's name was dragged through the mud, his carefully crafted reputation lay in tatters. This was what I'd been craving, a validation of my ruthlessness that no tryst could ever provide. His phone calls started, first tentative, then increasingly desperate. His voice, normally so composed, crackled with tension. "Sarah, is this you? Are you doing this?" That's when the acting started. "What are you talking about, Mike? Is everything okay at work?" All wide-eyed innocence, the concerned wife routine perfected through years of lying. He must have suspected me, but I left no fingerprints, no trails leading back to the architect of his downfall. And hearing his panic, well, that fueled me even more. The game had flipped, and now he squirmed under the pressure I'd once felt. Watching his world crumble, a twisted part of me enjoyed the show. My heart pounded in my chest, not with the thrill of illicit romance, but something deeper, almost primal. This was about survival, about proving I wasn't the helpless pawn he thought me to be. He might have taken everything I had, but he couldn't break me. Instead, I'd break him. The news became my daily fix. Each new allegation, each new investigation, was another victory. It was exhilarating, almost addictive. This revenge wasn't about passion or pleasure. It was about proving my strength, about taking back the control he'd so cleverly stolen. He built his empire, but I'd set the fire that was consuming it. And there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it. The end came with brutal swiftness. Mike's company imploded under the weight of lawsuits and scrutiny, leaving a gaping hole in his carefully curated life. Bankruptcy. A word I hadn't even understood a few months ago, now painted his future. Each headline about failed deals and seized assets brought a surge of dark satisfaction. My lawyers, fueled by my newfound vindictiveness, pounced. The divorce they'd stalled now moved with sickening speed. They stripped him bare, not out of duty, but because it pleased me to see his pristine world reduced to dust. He was nothing, had nothing, and I'd orchestrated it all. Then, the perfect cherry on top, paparazzi photos. Him, once the epitome of success, looking haggard and desperate, leaving some shabby motel. Tabloids ran wild, and the humiliation must have been excruciating. Even in his defeat, I couldn't help but squeeze that last bit of twisted joy from his ruin. The celebration was almost an afterthought. Champagne flowed, surrounded by people I barely knew, opportunists drawn to a newly single woman with a pocket full of Mike's former riches. Their toasts and hollow laughter were background noise to the real victory song playing in my head. I raised a glass, the bubbles tickling my throat like the first hint of my impending victory. These people meant nothing. They were pawns in a new game, one I was already planning. I was tired of playing by the rules, tired of living a life someone else decided for me. I'd used Mike's world to fuel this revenge, but I wasn't about to stay in it. This victory was about more than destroying him. It was about freedom. The freedom to build a life entirely on my terms, to unleash the woman I'd kept hidden for so long. Sure, the future was uncertain, maybe even dangerous. But it was mine, and in that moment, as the sycophants buzzed around me, I felt an utterly intoxicating mix of satisfaction and exhilaration. Maybe I wasn't a good wife, maybe I wasn't meant for that life. But as I looked over the remnants of the empire I destroyed, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was damn good at winning. My victory party had barely ended when it happened. An unmarked envelope delivered to my doorstep, no return address, just a single photo. Me, months ago, caught in the act of slipping into that cheap apartment with the model guy. The timestamp was damning, proof of my infidelity during the very months I was plotting against Mike. My blood ran cold, a wave of nausea washed over me. He knew all along, my every betrayal, every lie. Suddenly, his quiet acceptance, his lack of a fight made horrifying sense. He wasn't playing the victim, he was playing the long game, waiting for me to destroy myself. Another envelope lay underneath, filled with legal documents. Shock dissolved into terror. Mike was countersuing, not for divorce anymore, but for defamation. Meticulous records of my slander, my orchestrated whispers, the way I'd painted him as the villain to destroy him. He'd documented it all, and now the tables had viciously turned. My so-called allies, the shady characters I'd used, vanished like smoke. Suddenly, no one wanted to be associated with me. Their own reputations were at stake, and I was now poison. They circled back to Mike, desperate to cut ties and save themselves. Panic morphed into full-blown terror. I was trapped. My lawyers, the ones who had happily bled Mike dry, were now hedging their bets. The laws I'd manipulated were poised to crush me. Desperation gnawed at me. I ran through every scenario, every escape plan, but each dead ended in failure. This wasn't a messy divorce. This was a game of annihilation, and I was about to lose spectacularly. He'd set me up beautifully. Let me run wild, let me think I had the upper hand. Every destructive act of revenge I'd reveled in was another nail in my own coffin. His revenge was complete, and my arrogance had been my downfall. I was an architect of chaos, but Mike, silent and patient Mike, was the true mastermind. The knock came, not from a lawyer with more soul-crushing documents, but from the police. Cold efficiency, handcuffs, and a list of charges that made my head spin: fraud, conspiracy, defamation. The words blurred together as I was bundled into the back of a police car, the remnants of my victory party a mocking echo. My new residence was a grimy holding cell. Gone were the champagne flutes and flattering whispers, replaced with the stench of stale sweat and a fear so deep it threatened to choke me. This wasn't just defeat, it was obliteration. As I sat on that cold, hard bench, the full weight of Mike's vengeance settled upon me. He'd played me ruthlessly, allowed me to believe I held the power, while meticulously constructing my downfall. My lies, my network of shady associates, the destruction I'd reaped, they were the very weapons he'd used against me, turning my pride into a trap I'd eagerly sprinted towards. His footsteps echoed down the corridor. I held my breath, terror coiling in my gut like a venomous snake. The cell door creaked open, and there he stood. Not the broken shell of the man I'd left behind, but someone else. Cold, calculated, eyes devoid of any warmth he might have once held. "You wanted a game, Sarah," his voice dripped with icy disdain, "and now it's over. You lost." The words echoed the cruel truth. I had craved control, craved the thrill of victory. Now, stripped of my carefully constructed illusions, all that remained was utter ruin. Every betrayal, every scheme, had boomeranged back, leaving me in the very place I'd sought to put him. This was the end. Not just a failed relationship, but the destruction of everything I thought I was. The game wasn't exciting anymore, it was a nightmare. All I could see, reflected in his unforgiving eyes, was a desperate, pathetic, and broken woman. I'd won nothing, lost everything, and worst of all, I had only myself